You decided to run for the presidential nomination in 2000. What was the process like in deciding to go for that? And then afterwards, did you think about doing it again?
Well, I always wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I mean, I grew up reading history, and I realized there was a time in America where the elderly didn't have health care or a pension, when the Great Lakes were industrial sewers, when women and African Americans didn't have a right to vote, and when corporations did whatever they wanted to their workers and to their employees. But political leadership changed those things. That's the kind of thing I wanted to do in my time and more. And so I ran for the Senate. And naturally, after being in the Senate for a while, I always had a love affair with the country. I'd go on American journeys, for example, to try to understand the country. In fact, you might say, I want to know the country like I once knew the seams of a basketball. And so I'd spend 2 days with a wheat farmer in North Dakota, or with somebody in Cajun country, or at the border at El Paso, or steel mill in Ohio. And I wanted, and therefore it's kind of a natural evolution to want to be president of all the people. And I was considered for that, asked to do that a number of times. And in 2000, I decided I was ready and I'd take a shot, even though I knew it'd be a long shot against the sitting vice president.
Amazing. And then throughout all the different successes in your career, and they span so broad and in so many different categories, you always seem to decide to move on to something bigger and better, which is something I think a lot of people can relate to in their careers, where it's, you're doing one thing, it might be going well, it might not, but there comes a point where you have to decide to go for something bigger and better. What was the decision making like in deciding when to call something quits and when to move on to something better?
Well, Buster, what about you? I mean, when are you going to move on to something bigger and better? I mean, you'll be asking yourself the same question that
For
everybody
sure.
asks themselves, right? When is it time to move on? When you're a basketball player, your body tells you when it's time to move on, right? So I was 10 years in the NBA, 12 years body time. And my interest in the game, when I was in college and high school, I would hit 25. I would require myself to hit 25 shots in a row from 5 spots on the court, or I wouldn't leave the court, right? And by the time I was final, my pro was 10 or 13 from those places, right? Because my concentration had lagged. So it's time to move on. I wanted to go to politics, and then ran to politics, and then after politics, ran to presidential. Then after that, I was finished. And so I had a time of soul searching and ultimately chose finance, finally becoming my father's banker son, right? And I now like to find young companies that will make a difference in the world and help finance them. I have a radio show on Sirius XM radio called American Voices for almost 20 years. I've interviewed 1,400 people. I've had 490 shows, and it's about people, how they live their lives. Unusual stories about people who are doing good in their community, or people who have unusual jobs, like the woman that goes after boa pythons in the Everglades, right? And so life has a way of, if you're open, there will always be something that will occur to you if you appreciate your imagination and you open yourself up to other people. If you've said, I'm a basketball player, or I'm a politician, and that's the way I'm going to conceive myself for the rest of my life, well, you're going to be not stuck, but you're going to have limited room to move. If you say, I'm a human being, and what is there about being a human being that's incredible? Well, it's imagination, among other things. And how do you imagine? You imagine other things to do. You imagine other people to meet. You imagine yourself growing in ways that only you could imagine when you're in the middle of trying to grow. And that
Uh,
happened to
I
me.
love that. I love that. It's so true. People love to, and usually I don't think it's intentional, but people do put boxes on themselves especially when they become good at something, because it takes so long to become good at something. And then I've seen that be a real struggle. So
But
it's,
one of the things that I try to do in the film on Max, Rolling Along, is that people see that they can grow in a variety of ways, and you grow in your individual way. And if you do that, you sometimes are going to have some bumps, some sadnesses, as well as triumphs. You're sometimes going to have some losses. But each of those are experiences that enrich you as a human being and allow you to grow.